Welcome to Shatter.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. She left the house in that dark green dress, the one that used to be for me. She didn't say much. Just, I'll be back late. Don't wait up. I nodded, didn't even look up from the sink. The sound of her heels faded down the hallway like a clock ticking louder with every step. I didn't ask where she was going. I already knew. A friend's party. One of those networking things. I wasn't invited. Not because I couldn't come, because she didn't want me there. Said I'd be bored. Said I never enjoy these things. Said it like she was doing me a favor. But it wasn't what she said that stuck. It was how she said it. Like I was already out of the picture. Like she was rehearsing distance. The house was quiet once the door closed. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. The kind that echoes in your chest. I walked through the rooms we used to fill. Now they just held ghosts. We hadn't fought. That's the thing. No screaming, no accusations. Just a slow, invisible drift. Like we'd both been holding opposite ends of a rope for years, and I'd only now noticed my hands were empty. And maybe I was the one who let go first. Maybe that's what made tonight inevitable. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, thumb hovering over nothing in particular. No notifications. No calls. Just reflex. I wasn't checking in on her. I didn't need to. I was checking something else. Something I hadn't looked at in years. Tinder. Not mine. Hers. I don't know what made me look. Call it instinct. Or something darker. She hadn't deleted the app. It was still active. Still connected to her work email. Her profile was public, new pictures, new bio. Nothing explicit. Just curated. Intentional. Recent. I stared at one photo, the same green dress. Taken last week. The caption? Rediscovering myself. She hadn't matched with anyone yet. At least not publicly. But that didn't matter. The betrayal wasn't in the meeting. It was in the intent. The wanting. That's the moment something shifted in me. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Just silence. Cold. Thick. Full. She wanted to feel alive again. And I realized I hadn't felt alive in years. Not since the fourth negative test. Not since the fifth. And now, maybe for the first time in our marriage, I truly understood what distance meant. Because she wasn't cheating. Not technically. But she was preparing to. And me? I was already gone. She came home past midnight. I heard the soft click of the door, the careful rustle of heels being slipped off, her jacket hitting the hallway chair like she was trying not to wake me. I was awake. Had been for hours. She didn't check the bedroom. Didn't peek in. Didn't say anything. Just moved through the house like someone avoiding a stranger. And maybe that's what we were now. Strangers. Living in the same shell. She thought the silence was still my version of passive withdrawal. She'd gotten used to that, me being quiet, calm, emotionally tucked in. But this wasn't retreat. This wasn't numbness. This was calculation. I stopped trying to hold it all up. Stopped checking if she ate, if she needed anything, if she still believed in us. I let the weight fall where it may, and it landed exactly where it needed to on her. In the morning, she walked into the kitchen with that soft, slightly strained smile. Said something about the weather. I nodded, poured my coffee, didn't offer her any. She leaned against the counter like she was waiting for something, words, a glance, even tension. But I gave her none of it. She wasn't used to that. That day, I rerouted the shared savings account. Quietly. Legally. No passwords changed, nothing dramatic. Just structure. Clarity. I checked in with a friend at a law firm. No decisions. Just options. Just awareness. She sent me a text around lunch. Want to do something together tonight? I stared at it for a full minute. Not out of indecision, out of disbelief. Suddenly, she remembered there was an US. I typed, then erased. Typed again. Finally sent, got plans. She didn't reply. That night, I stayed late at the gym. Not because I needed the workout, but because I needed the air. The space. The version of myself that didn't orbit around someone else's instability. When I got home, she was curled up on the couch with a movie paused on the screen. Wine in one hand. That green dress again. She looked up like she had been waiting. Expecting something. I walked past her. No words. Just the sound of my keys hitting the bowl near the door. This wasn't punishment. This was rebalancing. For years, I'd thought that silence was weakness. That if I didn't fight, didn't shout, I was losing ground. But now I knew better. Sometimes silence is the loudest way to reclaim yourself. And sometimes the most dangerous man is the one who doesn't need to raise his voice to let you know he's already gone. The first sign she noticed was the breakfast. She made eggs, toast, even cut fruit. I came into the kitchen and it was already laid out. The kind of gesture she hadn't done in months, maybe years. I stood there for a second, not out of gratitude, out of curiosity. She said, "I thought we could eat together." I sat, ate in silence, not to make a point, just because I didn't have anything left to say. She kept glancing at me, like someone checking for cracks in a wall, as if she was looking for evidence I was still the man who once left her notes in her bag, the man who reminded her to drink water during hard days, the man who used to fight for the version of us that she stopped feeding a long time ago. That man was gone, and the one sitting across from her wasn't angry. He was finished. That same day, she texted me twice. Once about dinner. Once with a photo of the cat lying on the windowsill, something she used to send when we were still laughing in the same direction. I replied to the first with, "I'll eat out." Ignored the second. By Thursday, the shift was too large for her to ignore. She asked, "Is something going on?" I said, "Everything's fine." And it was. For me. That's the thing they never expect. They think the silence means suffering. But real silence? The kind that spreads like ice inside the chest? That comes after the pain. After the last ember dies out. She started dressing nicer around the house. Subtle makeup. New perfume. Little efforts I begged for months ago, back when I still believed effort could fix what she kept burying. Now it all looked performative. A rerun of a show I stopped watching. I started sleeping better. Reading more. Even fixed the garage door she had been nagging about for months. Not for her. Just because I needed order in the spaces I still controlled. One night, I caught her staring at me from the hallway. I was folding laundry, humming to myself. She said nothing. I didn't look up. She used to control the temperature in the house. The mood. The energy. Now I was the thermostat. And the chill? That was all mine. There's something terrifying for a person like her, someone used to pulling strings, to realize the puppet just cut its own threads and walked away without saying goodbye. She wasn't scared of losing me. She was scared of no longer matching. And that fear? It had only just begun. It started small. The way she hovered longer in doorways. How her eyes followed me across the room, but her mouth stayed silent. She didn't know how to ask, didn't even know what she was asking for. Because the version of me she wanted? That man was gone. And the version I'd become wasn't there to comfort her confusion. One night, she sat beside me on the couch. Too close. Like she was testing something. The remote stayed in my hand. The show kept playing. My body didn't flinch. She asked, "Do you remember that trip we talked about? The cabin." I nodded once. "Maybe we should book it." I didn't answer. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. She wasn't trying to rebuild anything. She was trying to rewind. But time doesn't move backward. Especially when the damage wasn't done in one big explosion, but through 1,000 tiny, deliberate withdrawals. Hers. Not mine. She started texting more. Not just during the day, late at night. "I miss how we used to laugh. Are we okay? I feel like we've been distant." I responded with 3 words, max. Always polite. Never warm. My indifference wasn't punishment. It was a mirror. And she was starting to see her own reflection for the first time in years. The silence made her unravel. Slowly. She stopped posting as much on social media. No more curated stories. No more gym selfies with motivational quotes. She canceled a night out with friends. Claimed she wasn't feeling well. What she didn't say out loud was louder than anything she could have posted. She was spiraling quietly. Elegantly. The kind of panic that doesn't scream. It simmers. By the end of that week, she'd cleaned the entire house top to bottom. Set candles in the hallway. Played the playlist we used to cook to. I came home to the smell of roasted vegetables and some dish she hadn't made in years. She stood by the stove, too dressed up for the kitchen. Eyes wide. Almost hopeful. Thought we could eat together. I sat. Ate. Thanked her. Then cleaned my plate, placed it in the sink, and went upstairs without a word. The moment I heard the sound of her breath hitch as I closed the bedroom door, I knew. She finally understood what it felt like. To be near someone who no longer placed her at the center of his universe. She wasn't the main character anymore. She wasn't even part of the story. It happened on a Sunday. Rain tapping on the windows like a clock ticking louder than it should. She had been pacing all morning. Not saying much. Just moving from room to room like a woman looking for something she'd already lost. I sat at the table, scrolling through the news, not really reading. Just filling the space. Letting the silence grow tall between us. That kind of silence that doesn't ask permission. It just takes over. Then I heard it, the bag rustling. A paper one, like from a pharmacy. She stood in the hallway, holding it in both hands, her fingers trembling just slightly, like even her skin wasn't sure what she was doing. "I need to show you something," she said. Her voice didn't shake, but it didn't land, either. Like she was speaking through fog. I didn't move, just raised my eyes. She stepped forward, pulled out the test, laid it gently on the table between us. Positive. Bold letters. Clear lines. No ambiguity. My chest didn't tighten. My face didn't change. I just stared at it. At her. At the weight of what this meant. She said it wasn't planned. That she didn't even believe it when she saw it. That she took 4 more just to be sure. And then she cracked. Not with volume, but with words she didn't know how to carry. She said she had felt invisible. Said the childlessness made her question if she was even alive anymore. Said she didn't go to the app to cheat, but to feel wanted. To prove something to herself that she was afraid to admit even to me. She never messaged anyone, she said. Never met up. Never crossed that line. But the line was in her mind. And she knew it. She called it a mistake. A desperate spiral. She said the test changed everything. I didn't say a word. Not then. Not for hours. She cried softly in the other room. I stayed in my chair, staring at the test like it was written in another language. It didn't feel like victory, or revenge, or irony. It felt like a question. A child. After everything. After the silence. After the quiet betrayal and the unspoken war. And now, she wanted to rewrite the story. But stories don't erase. They just turn pages. That night, I slept in the same bed, but didn't touch her. She lay curled on her side, breath shallow, waiting for something I wasn't ready to give. I stared at the ceiling for hours. Not in rage. Not even in fear. Just silence again. But this time, it wasn't cold. It was choice. 3 days. I didn't speak. Not out of cruelty. Not out of punishment. Out of necessity. Because sometimes, when everything fractures at once, words become rubble. And silence is the only way to sift through what's left. She moved through the house like a shadow trying not to cast itself. Tidy. Careful. Measured in every step. The same woman who once filled our space with noise, playlists, and questions. Now barely made sound. But it wasn't her quiet that echoed. It was mine. She left brochures on the table. A folder from the clinic. A note with the first ultrasound appointment. No demands. No, we need to talk. Just presence. Almost like she was letting it all hang there. Unguarded. Uncontrolled. It was the first honest thing between us in years. And I didn't know what to do with that. I went for long walks. Didn't tell her where. Sat in the park. Watched strangers live lives I'd never touch. Fathers chasing toddlers. Young couples arguing over coffee orders. A woman sitting alone on a bench, crying behind sunglasses. Life. Real. Unfiltered. Unedited. And suddenly I realized this thing in my chest, this tightening, this push and pull. It wasn't anger. It was grief. For what we were. For what we pretended to be. For what we both killed slowly with our silence and pride. The betrayal wasn't the app. It wasn't the profile or the green dress or even her confession. It was the fact that for years, we both let the gap between us grow and grow and grow. Until she needed to feel wanted by a stranger. And I needed to disappear in my own home just to feel sane. And now? Now there was a life inside her. A child that didn't ask for any of this. So I sat in the quiet and asked myself a question I hadn't dared touch until then. Not, do I love her? Not, can I forgive her? But this. What kind of man do I want to become now? Because I could walk. Had every right to. No one would blame me. I had the folder from the lawyer still sitting untouched in my drawer. But what if strength wasn't walking away? What if it was staying? Not for her. But for something higher than both of us? I wasn't sure of the answer yet. But I was beginning to feel something unfamiliar. Hope. Cautious. Quiet. Heavy. But real. I found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table with her hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. The light from the window hit her face in this pale, tired way. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, something in her posture. As if she'd finally stopped performing. I stood in the doorway for a moment, then stepped inside. She didn't look up. So I sat across from her. Quiet. Still. She flinched slightly when I spoke. I said, "You hurt me." Simple. Quiet. No venom. She didn't respond. Just stared at the mug, as if it could absorb the shame she was carrying. I let the silence stretch. Not to punish, but to give the words weight. Then I added, "But I think I hurt you too." Her eyes lifted slowly, cautious. Red at the corners, like she hadn't slept. She looked at me like she was scared to hope. I didn't give her a speech. Didn't unravel some long emotional monologue. I said what needed saying. We both disappeared. You just did it louder. That broke something in her. Not in a dramatic way, no sobs, no outbursts. Just this quiet crumple of her body, like hearing that truth gave her permission to finally stop pretending she had it all together. We didn't talk about the past. Not that day. Didn't dissect timelines. Didn't audit pain. I told her I'd go with her to the appointment. She nodded. Not with relief. With disbelief. Then I stood, rinsed my own coffee cup, and walked out of the room. No hug. No promises. Just movement. That night, she slept curled toward me. Not touching. Just near. And I didn't move away. Because forgiveness isn't a warm gesture. It's not a kiss on the forehead or a shared blanket. It's a decision. Made quietly. In the wreckage. And I hadn't made mine fully. Not yet. But I was no longer holding rage in my chest. I wasn't calculating her pain. Wasn't tallying her wrongs. I was watching her. The way she moved slower now. More careful. The way she waited before speaking, as if testing the weight of every word. She was no longer playing the role. She was finally just present. And for the first time in a long time, so was I. The waiting room was too quiet. Muted colors. Plastic chairs. The low hum of fluorescent lights. She sat next to me, hands folded over her stomach like she was protecting something fragile. I didn't speak. Just watched the clock tick a little too slowly. Her leg bounced once. Then again. Then stopped when she realized I noticed. The nurse called her name. She stood. Looked at me. I stood too. Inside, the air felt thinner. The doctor spoke in that careful, optimistic tone they use when they aren't sure how much emotion is in the room. The screen lit up. There it was. Small. Pulsing. Like a secret knocking from the other side of a locked door. And then the sound. Not hers. Not mine. Heartbeat. Fast. Raw. Real. I didn't cry. Didn't smile. Didn't say a word. But something cracked. Not the pain. Not the betrayal. Something deeper. A wall I didn't know I still had inside me shifted, just slightly. She glanced at me, trying to read my face. I didn't give her anything to hold on to. Just breath. Just stillness. On the way home, we didn't talk much. She asked if I wanted to stop somewhere for lunch. I said no. She didn't push. When we got home, she disappeared into the bedroom. I stayed downstairs, sat on the couch, and stared at nothing in particular. But my mind didn't wander this time. It focused. Tightly. That heartbeat. That tiny sound from a person who didn't ask for any of this. A life growing between the ruins we built. And I thought, maybe it's not about erasing the past. Maybe it's about learning how to build something new on top of it. Stronger. Smarter. Honest. That child wouldn't care about Bumble profiles. Wouldn't know how we got here. They'd only care who showed up. Who stayed. I wasn't staying for her. Not anymore. Not for redemption. Not for pride. I was staying because I wanted to. Because that heartbeat gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not love. Not trust. Not even hope. Purpose. She found me in the garage. The air was thick with dust and silence. I had been standing there for almost an hour, staring at an old shelf I kept meaning to take apart. Not moving. Not thinking. Just breathing. She didn't knock or clear her throat. She just stood behind me, waiting. When I finally turned, she looked different. Not softer. Not broken. Just real. Like someone who had peeled away every layer of pretending and was finally standing in her own skin. She said she didn't expect forgiveness. Didn't need a second chance. She only wanted to say one thing, and say it without begging. She told me she understood now. How invisible I had felt. How loud her silence had been. How long she had been performing instead of participating. And then she said something I hadn't expected. I didn't know how to need you without resenting it. That landed harder than any excuse or apology ever could. Because that was the truth we'd both been circling for years. She had been fighting a version of dependence that didn't exist. And I had been fighting to be needed by someone who was terrified of needing anyone. We were never enemies. Just two people at war with their own reflections. I didn't say much. Didn't give her the relief of closure. What I gave her was stillness. Presence. The kind she hadn't earned, but maybe needed anyway. That night, I set the lawyer's folder on fire. Quietly. In the fire pit out back. No ceremony. No theatrics. She watched from the window. Didn't say a word. And the thing is, I wasn't doing it for her. I was doing it for the man I was becoming. Not the man who stayed because he was weak. Not the man who forgave out of fear. But the one who could look betrayal in the eye and say, "You will not define me." And maybe, just maybe, this child would be born into something imperfect but honest. Something we would build not from romance or illusion, but from ruin. Stone by stone. Quiet. Careful. Real. The kind of foundation that doesn't collapse in the dark. We didn't celebrate. There was no dramatic kiss, no candlelit moment of reconciliation. Just two people brushing teeth in the same bathroom again. Two towels hanging on the rack instead of one. She started putting her hand on her belly more often. Not performative. Protective. Like she was finally allowing herself to believe in what was coming. I didn't reach out to touch it. Not yet. That kind of intimacy had to be earned back slowly, if at all. But I stayed. Woke up. Made coffee. Said good morning. Not because things were healed, but because I had made peace with the scar. We began talking in fragments. Little things. Groceries. Doctor schedules. Nursery colors she wasn't sure about. Nothing deep. Nothing risky. Like testing the ice after a thaw. I watched her differently now. Not through suspicion. Not through longing. Just with awareness. I saw the way she hesitated before laughing, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to be light again. The way she moved slower in the mornings, holding her lower back like the weight of this new life was anchoring her to the moment. She didn't apologize again, and I didn't need her to. Some things don't need repeating, only remembering. At night, I still lay on my side of the bed, still kept the distance, but I noticed the way she drifted an inch closer each time. Not enough to touch, just enough to hope. Maybe that's all forgiveness is. Not letting go of what happened, but choosing not to sharpen it anymore. A month later, she placed a new ultrasound photo on the fridge. This one had fingers, a spine, something human. I stood there for a while, staring at it. Then I took a magnet and pinned it beside the grocery list. No words, just choice. I could have left, could have walked into a cleaner future with a lighter heart. But something about this wreckage felt honest. Something about rebuilding it felt like strength, not surrender. So I stayed, not as the man I was, but as the man I had become. And when she whispered one night, barely audible through the dark, "Do you still see me?" I didn't rush to answer, didn't turn, didn't lie. I just breathed in the silence between us, and finally said, "I see something new." I could have walked. I had every reason to. But sometimes strength isn't in leaving. Sometimes it's in staying and building something that will outlive the pain. Been through it. When they crossed a line, and you made sure they felt it.